The forest was silent, except for the crack of twigs under our boots and the thud of my heart in my chest. I glanced at Ethan, his shadow stretching long across the pine needles, and felt the weight of something unsaid clawing at my throat. We were alone out here, miles from anyone, and the air between us was electric with a truth neither of us dared to name. We'd been best friends since we were 12, growing up in the small, gritty town of Blackthorn, Oregon. Ethan was the reckless one, the guy who'd sneak beers from his dad's fridge and convince me to jump into the freezing river at midnight. I was Lucas, the quiet kid who overthought everything, always trailing behind him, half in awe, half terrified of his wildness. We were inseparable, two halves of a whole, until the summer after college when everything changed. It was July, and we'd planned this camping trip to the Cascade Mountains to escape the suffocating monotony of our hometown. Blackthorn was the kind of place where everyone knew your business, where whispers about those kinds of people could ruin you. Ethan had just broken up with his girlfriend, Sarah, and I was dodging my mom's endless questions about why I wasn't dating. The woods felt like the only place we could breathe. We set up camp by a small lake, the water so clear it mirrored the stars. Ethan built the fire, his hands steady as he stacked logs, while I unpacked our gear. The night was warm, the kind of summer heat that made your skin feel alive. We cracked open a couple of beers, the firelight dancing across Ethan's face, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw and the way his green eyes caught the flames. "You ever think about getting out of Blackthorn for good?" he asked, his voice low, almost lost in the crackle of the fire. I shrugged, staring into the flames. "Yeah, but where to?" "Portland. Seattle. It's not like I've got a plan." He leaned back, propping himself on his elbows, his gaze fixed on the sky. "Anywhere but here. Man, this place, it's like it's got its claws in us." I wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his tone stopped me. Instead, I took a long sip of my beer, the cold liquid doing nothing to ease the heat building in my chest. We talked about dumb stuff after that old high school pranks. The time we got caught sneaking into the drive-in, but the air felt heavier, like a storm was brewing. The next morning, we hiked deeper into the forest, following a trail that wound through ancient pines and moss-covered rocks. Ethan was quieter than usual, his usual cocky grin replaced by something I couldn't read. I tried to fill the silence with jokes, but they fell flat, and soon we were just walking, the crunch of our steps the only sound. By noon, we reached a clearing with a view of the mountains, jagged peaks cutting into the sky. Ethan dropped his pack and sat on a fallen log, his shoulders tense. I sat next to him, close enough to feel the warmth of his arm, but not close enough to cross that invisible line we'd always danced around. "Lucas," he said suddenly, his voice rough, "you ever feel like you're hiding something from everyone?" My breath caught. I knew what he meant, but I wasn't ready to admit it, not to him, not to myself. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned to look at me, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I thought he might say it. The thing we'd both been avoiding for years. The thing that made my heart race every time he laughed too loud or slung an arm around my shoulders. But then he shook his head, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "Forget it," he muttered, standing up and brushing dirt off his jeans. "Let's keep moving." I wanted to grab him, to make him say it, but fear glued me to the log. What if I was wrong? What if I said it first and ruined everything? So I followed him, my heart pounding, the unspoken words burning in my chest. That night, back at camp, the tension was unbearable. We cooked dinner over the fire, but neither of us ate much. Ethan kept glancing at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. Finally, he stood up, tossing his plate aside, and walked toward the lake. I followed, because that's what I always did. The water was still, reflecting the moon like a silver mirror. Ethan stood at the edge, his hands shoved in his pockets, his back to me. I stopped a few feet away, my heart hammering so loud I was sure he could hear it. "Ethan," I said, my voice shaking. "What's going on?" He didn't turn around. "You know what's going on, Lucas." And there it was. The line we'd pretended didn't exist, laid bare in the moonlight. I took a step closer, my hands trembling. "Say it," I whispered. He turned then, his face raw with emotion. And before I could process it, he closed the distance between us. His hand cupped the back of my neck. And then his lips were on mine, desperate and fierce, like he'd been holding it back for years. I kissed him back, my hands fisting in his jacket, the world falling away until it was just us, alone in the woods. But then he pulled back, his breath ragged, his eyes wide with panic. "I'm sorry," he stammered. "I shouldn't have." "Don't." I cut him off, my voice sharp. "Don't you dare take it back." He stared at me, torn between fear and something else, something that looked like hope. And in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The kiss hung between us like a live wire, sparking and dangerous. Ethan stepped back, his chest heaving, his hands clenched into fists as if he could physically hold himself together. I stood frozen, my lips still tingling, my mind racing to catch up with what had just happened. "Lucas," he started, but his voice broke, and he turned away, staring out at the lake. The moonlight cast sharp shadows across his face, highlighting the conflict etched there. I wanted to reach for him, to pull him back, but my own fear rooted me in place. "We should head back to camp," he said finally, his voice flat, like he was trying to erase what had just happened. He didn't look at me as he started walking, his boots crunching against the gravelly shore. I followed, my heart a tangled mess of hope and dread. Back at the fire, the silence was suffocating. Ethan sat on the opposite side, poking at the embers with a stick, his movements sharp and restless. I watched him, trying to find the words to bridge the gap between us. But every sentence I rehearsed in my head felt wrong. How do you talk about something you've spent years pretending doesn't exist? Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. "Ethan, we need to talk about this." He froze, the stick still in his hand. "There's nothing to talk about," he said, but his voice was strained, like he was trying to convince himself. "Bullshit," I snapped, surprising myself with the edge in my tone. "You kissed me. You don't get to act like it didn't happen." His head jerked up, his eyes meeting mine across the fire. For a second, I saw the raw vulnerability I'd glimpsed by the lake. But then his walls slammed back up. It was a mistake. Okay. I don't know, caught up in the moment. A mistake. The word hit me like a punch. You don't kiss someone like that by accident. He stood up, tossing the stick into the fire, sparks flying into the night. "What do you want me to say?" "Lucas, that I've been thinking about you like that for years. That I'm terrified of what it means. Because I am. I'm fucking scared. Okay." His confession knocked the air out of me. I stood too, my hands shaking. "You think I'm not? You think I haven't been lying awake at night, wondering what the hell is wrong with me because I can't stop thinking about you?" He stared at me, his expression a mix of shock and something softer, something that made my chest ache. "You never said anything," he whispered. "Neither did you," I shot back. "We've been dancing around this for years, Ethan. Pretending we're just friends. Pretending it's normal to feel like this." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing a few steps. "It's not that simple. You know what Blackthorn is like. You know what they'd say, what they'd do. I didn't know. Blackthorn was a town where conformity was king, where being different wasn't just frowned upon, it was dangerous. I'd heard the slurs tossed around at the diner, seen the way people looked at anyone who didn't fit the mold. But standing there, with the fire crackling and the woods stretching out around us, I didn't care. I don't give a damn about Blackthorn right now, I said, stepping closer. I care about you. About us. He stopped pacing. His eyes locked on mine. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me again. But instead, he shook his head. I can't do this. Lucas. Not here. Not now. He turned and disappeared into the tent, leaving me alone with the fire and the weight of his words. I wanted to scream, to shake him until he admitted what we both knew. But I just stood there, the cold seeping into my bones. The next day was torture. Ethan was distant, barely speaking as we packed up camp and hiked to a new spot deeper in the forest. The trail was steeper now, the air cooler, the trees denser. Every step felt like a metaphor for the distance growing between us. I tried to focus on the scenery, the way the sunlight dappled the forest floor, the distant call of a hawk, but my mind kept replaying that kiss. His confession, his retreat. By late afternoon, we reached a small waterfall, the water cascading over rocks into a clear pool below. Ethan dropped his pack and knelt by the water, splashing his face. I watched him, my heart twisting. He looked so tired, like the weight of his own thoughts was crushing him. Ethan, I said softly, sitting on a nearby rock. We can't keep pretending nothing happened. He didn't look at me, just kept staring at the water. I don't know how to do this. Lucas, I don't know how to be, whatever this is. Then we figure it out together, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. But you have to stop running. He finally met my eyes. And for the first time, I saw real fear there, not just of Blackthorn, but of himself. What if I ruin everything? He asked, his voice barely audible over the rush of the waterfall. You won't, I said, believing it with every fiber of my being. Not if we're honest. He didn't respond, just stood and picked up his pack, signaling it was time to move on. But as we continued hiking, I noticed the way his shoulders relaxed slightly, the way he stayed a little closer to me on the trail. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me hoping. That night, we set up camp near the waterfall, the sound of the water a constant hum in the background. Ethan was still quiet, but he didn't pull away when I sat next to him by the fire. We didn't talk about the kiss, but we didn't need to. The air between us was different now, charged with possibility. As the stars came out, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let him hide anymore, not from me, not from himself. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. The waterfall's steady roar filled the silence between us as we sat by the fire, the flames casting flickering shadows across Ethan's face. I could feel the shift in him, subtle but undeniable, like a crack in a dam holding back a flood. He hadn't run from me tonight, hadn't shut me out, and that gave me the courage to push forward. Ethan, I said, my voice steady despite the nerves twisting my gut. We can't keep dodging this. You know it, and I know it. He looked at me, his green eyes catching the firelight. And for once, he didn't look away. I'm trying. Lucas, he said, his voice raw. But it's a lot. You know how I grew up. My dad, the church, the whole damn town, they'd lose their minds. I nodded, remembering the way his father used to preach fire and brimstone at the local church, his voice booming about sin and salvation. Ethan had always laughed it off, but I'd seen the way it lingered in his eyes, the fear of not measuring up. I get it, I said. But we're not in Blackthorn right now. It's just us. He let out a shaky breath, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. That's the problem. Out here, it's easy to forget the rules. But when we go back, he trailed off, staring into the fire like it held answers. Then we deal with it when we get there, I said, scooting closer. But don't tell me you regret it. Don't tell me that kiss didn't mean something. His head snapped up, his expression fierce. Of course it meant something. That's why I'm freaking out. Man. Because it meant everything. My heart stuttered at his words. And before I could stop myself, I reached out, my hand brushing his. He didn't pull away. And that small act felt like a victory. Then let's figure out what it means, I said. Together. He looked at our hands, his fingers curling slightly against mine. And for a moment, I thought he might lean in again. But then a twig snapped in the woods behind us, sharp and loud, and we both jumped. The moment shattered. What was that? Ethan whispered, his hand slipping from mine as he stood, scanning the darkness. Probably just an animal, I said, trying to sound calm. But my pulse was racing. The forest was dense here, the trees swallowing the moonlight, and the sound had come from somewhere close. Ethan grabbed a flashlight from his pack, the beam cutting through the shadows. Stay here, he said, his voice low. No way, I shot back, standing and grabbing my own flashlight. We're doing this together. He gave me a look, half annoyed, half relieved, and we moved toward the sound, our beams sweeping the underbrush. The forest was alive with small noises now. The rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl. But nothing explained the snap we'd heard. After a few minutes, we found nothing but a broken branch, likely snapped by a deer or a raccoon. False alarm, Ethan said, but his voice was tight, and he kept glancing over his shoulder as we walked back to camp. The interruption had broken the fragile connection we'd been building, and by the time we sat back down, the moment felt lost. Ethan was quiet again, his walls creeping back up. I wanted to scream in frustration, but instead, I just stoked the fire, letting the silence settle. The next morning, we packed up and continued our hike, the trail leading us higher into the mountains. The air was thinner now, the views more breathtaking, but the tension between us was a constant undercurrent. Ethan was trying. I could tell, small gestures, like handing me his water bottle without being asked or brushing my shoulder as he passed, but he was still holding back, and it was driving me crazy. By midday, we reached a rocky outcrop with a view of the entire valley, the lake below glinting like a jewel. We stopped to eat, sitting side by side on a flat boulder. The sun was warm, the breeze cool, and for a moment, it felt like we could be anyone, anywhere, free from the weight of Blackthorn's judgment. Remember when we used to talk about running away? Ethan said suddenly, his voice soft. Back in high school, we'd make these big plans to hitchhike to California, live on the beach. I smiled, the memory bittersweet. Yeah, you wanted to be a surfer. I was going to write the next great American novel. He chuckled, the sound warm and familiar. We were so dumb. But I kind of missed that. The dreaming. We could still dream, I said, turning to face him. It doesn't have to be California. Just somewhere we can be ourselves. His smile faded, and he looked out at the valley, his expression unreadable. Myself, he murmured. I'm not even sure who that is anymore. I wanted to tell him I saw him. The real him. The one who laughed too loud and cared too much. The one who'd kissed me like it was the only thing keeping him alive. But before I could, he stood, brushing crumbs off his jeans. We should keep going, he said. His voice clipped. We're losing daylight. I swallowed my frustration and followed. But as we hiked, I made a silent vow. I wasn't going to let him keep running. Not from me. Not from this. That night, we camped in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. The air was colder now, the stars sharper. Ethan built the fire while I set up the tent. And for a while, we worked in comfortable silence, the kind we'd always had before everything got complicated. As we ate, I caught him watching me, his eyes lingering longer than usual. What? I asked, a nervous laugh escaping. Nothing, he said, but his lips twitched into a small smile. Just, you look good out here. Like you belong. My face heated, and I ducked my head, focusing on my plate. You too, I mumbled, and when I glanced up, his smile was wider, almost like the old Ethan. After dinner, we sat by the fire, closer than we had the night before. The tension was still there, but it was softer now, laced with something warmer. I didn't push him to talk, and he didn't pull away. For now, that was enough. The fire was dying down, its embers glowing faintly as the night deepened around us. Ethan and I sat shoulder to shoulder, the warmth of his body a quiet comfort against the chill. I could feel the shift in him, the way his guard was slowly lowering. But I knew better than to push too hard. Not yet. Remember that time we got lost in the woods behind your house? Ethan said, breaking the silence. His voice was soft, almost nostalgic. We were what? 14. You were freaking out, thinking we'd die out there. I laughed, the memory sharp and vivid. You were the one who said we'd have to eat pine cones to survive. I was ready to write my will. He grinned, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Yeah, but I got us out. Didn't I? Always do. You always do, I said, and the words carried more weight than I intended. He looked at me, his smile fading into something more serious. And for a moment, I thought he might say something real. But then he looked away, poking at the fire with a stick. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like we were teetering on the edge of something, and I was determined to see it through. Ethan, I said, my voice steady. I don't want to go back to pretending. Not after everything. He didn't respond right away, just kept staring into the fire. Finally, he set the stick down and turned to me, his expression raw. I don't either, he admitted. But I don't know how to do this. Lucas, I don't know how to be this. The vulnerability in his voice broke something in me. I reached for his hand, and this time, he didn't pull away. His fingers laced with mine, tentative but firm, and my heart raced at the contact. Then we learn, I said. We don't have to have all the answers now. He looked at our joined hands, then up at me, his eyes searching. What if I mess it up? What if I hurt you? You won't, I said, squeezing his hand. Not if we're honest. He let out a shaky laugh, shaking his head. You make it sound so easy. It's not, I admitted. But it's worth it. For a moment, we just sat there, hands clasped, the fire crackling softly. Then, slowly, he leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. It wasn't a kiss, but it was just as intimate, a silent promise that he was trying. The next morning, we woke to a world blanketed in mist, the forest ethereal and quiet. Ethan was up before me, brewing coffee over the fire, and when I emerged from the tent, he handed me a mug without a word. The gesture felt like a peace offering, a small step toward something new. We hiked higher that day, the trail winding through rocky terrain, the air growing sharper. Ethan was more talkative, pointing out a hawk circling overhead or a patch of wildflowers tucked between the rocks. It felt like the old days, but better, because now there was an undercurrent of honesty between us. By afternoon, we reached a narrow ridge with a view that stole my breath, miles of forest stretching out below, the mountains rising in the distance like silent giants. Ethan stood beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, and for the first time, I felt like we were truly in this together. "You ever think about what it'd be like to stay out here?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Just leave everything behind." I glanced at him, trying to read his expression. "You mean run away for real this time?" He shrugged, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe. No Blackthorn. No judgment. Just us." The idea was tempting, but I knew it wasn't that simple. "We can't hide forever," I said, "but we can figure out how to live with it, wherever we are." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Yeah, maybe." That night, we camped on the ridge, the stars so bright they felt close enough to touch. Ethan was quieter again, but it wasn't the tense silence of before. It was thoughtful, like he was turning something over in his mind. I didn't push, just sat beside him, letting the moment be. As we lay in the tent later, the air cool and the world quiet, Ethan reached for my hand again. His fingers were warm, steady, and when he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I'm glad it's you, Lucas. If it had to be anyone, I'm glad it's you." My throat tightened, and I squeezed his hand. "Me too." We didn't say anything else, but we didn't need to. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same page, ready to face whatever came next. The ridge was bathed in golden light as the sun rose, painting the valley below in hues of amber and green. Ethan and I packed up camp in silence, but it was a comfortable silence now, laced with an understanding we hadn't had before. His hand brushed mine as he handed me a granola bar, and the small, deliberate touch sent a warmth through me that had nothing to do with the morning sun. We continued our hike, the trail descending now, winding through a dense grove of cedars. The air smelled of pine and earth, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of peace. Ethan was still cautious, his glances at me quick and searching, but there was a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. It was enough to keep me going. Around noon, we stopped by a small stream to refill our water bottles. Ethan knelt by the water, his reflection rippling in the current, and I watched him, my heart full. "You okay?" I asked, sitting on a nearby rock. He glanced up, a small smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" I pressed, keeping my tone light. He hesitated, then stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. "About how I spent so long running from this. From you." My breath caught, and I stood too, closing the distance between us. "You don't have to run anymore." He looked at me, his expression open in a way I'd never seen. "I know," he said softly. "I'm trying to believe that." Before I could respond, a low rumble echoed through the forest, distant but unmistakable. Thunder. The sky had been clear all morning, but now, dark clouds were gathering over the mountains, moving fast. "Shit," Ethan muttered, glancing up. "We need to find shelter." We grabbed our packs and hurried down the trail, searching for a place to wait out the storm. The wind picked up, rustling the trees, and within minutes, the first drops of rain began to fall. By the time we found a small cave tucked into a rocky hillside, the rain was coming down in sheets, soaking us through. Inside the cave, it was cramped but dry, the sound of the storm muffled by the stone walls. We dropped our packs and sat close together, our knees touching. Ethan's hair was plastered to his forehead, and I couldn't help but laugh. What? He asked, raising an eyebrow. You look like a drowned rat, I said, grinning. He smirked, shoving my shoulder. Says the guy who's dripping all over the place. The playful moment eased the tension, and for a while, we just sat there, listening to the rain. But as the storm raged outside, the air between us grew heavy again, charged with everything we hadn't said. Lucas, Ethan said finally, his voice low. I need to tell you something. My heart skipped a beat. What? He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the cave floor. Back in high school, I knew. About me. About us. But I was too scared to admit it. My dad. The town, they made it feel like it was wrong. Like I was wrong. So I pushed it down. Dated Sarah. Acted like I had it all together. But it was always you. His words hit me like a tidal wave, washing away years of doubt and fear. I reached for his hand, my voice trembling. Why didn't you say anything? Because I didn't want to lose you, he said, his voice breaking. You were my best friend. If I screwed it up, I'd have nothing. You're not going to lose me, I said fiercely, squeezing his hand. Not now. Not ever. He looked at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. And then he was kissing me again. Softer this time, but no less desperate. I kissed him back, my hands tangling in his wet hair. The storm outside fading to nothing. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard, our foreheads pressed together. I'm done running, he whispered. I'm in this. Lucas. For real. I smiled, my heart so full it hurt. Good. Because I'm not letting you go. The storm passed by evening, leaving the forest dripping and vibrant. We emerged from the cave, our clothes still damp but our spirits lighter. The trail was muddy, but we pressed on, side by side, the future feeling less daunting with every step. That night, we camped under a clear sky, the stars brighter than ever. Ethan lay next to me in the tent, his arms slung across my chest. And for the first time, I felt like we were truly us, no pretenses. No fear. Just us. The forest felt different now, as if the storm had washed away more than just the dust from the trails. Ethan and I moved through the trees with a new rhythm, our steps in sync, our silences filled with understanding rather than tension. His hand brushed mine as we walked, and though he didn't linger, the touch was enough to make my heart race. We were nearing the end of our planned route, the trail looping back toward the lake where we'd started. The thought of returning to Blackthorn loomed like a shadow, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the moment. Ethan was here, with me, and for now, that was enough. By midday, we reached a meadow bursting with wildflowers, the air sweet with their scent. Ethan stopped, dropping his pack and flopping onto the grass, arms spread wide. This is it, he said, grinning up at the sky. This is what freedom feels like. I laughed, lying down beside him, the grass cool against my back. You're such a sap, says the guy who cried during the fault in our stars. He teased, nudging my shoulder. I did not cry. I protested, but I was grinning too. It felt good to banter like this, like the old days, but with something new woven into each promise of more. We lay there for a while, the clouds drifting lazily overhead, the world quiet except for the hum of insects. Ethan's hand found mine in the grass, his fingers threading through mine, and I let myself believe this could be our life, moments like this, stolen from the world's judgment. But reality crept in, as it always did. What happens when we go back? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's grip tightened on my hand. I don't know, he admitted. But I know I don't want to go back to hiding. I turned my head to look at him, his profile sharp against the blue sky. Then we don't. I said. We figure out how to be us. No matter what. He nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. The weight of Blackthorn's expectations pressing down. I wanted to promise him it would be okay, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. Not in a town like ours. That afternoon, we continued hiking, the trail growing steeper as it wound toward a high lookout point. The air was cooler now, the forest thinning as we climbed. Ethan was quieter, his earlier lightness fading, and I knew he was thinking about the same thing I was, the real world waiting for us. At the lookout, we stood side by side, the wind whipping through our hair. The view was staggering mountains stretching endlessly, the lake a distant shimmer. Ethan's shoulder pressed against mine, and I felt the warmth of him, steady and real. I love you, he said suddenly, the words so quiet I almost missed them. My heart stopped, then surged. I turned to him, my voice shaking. What? He met my eyes, his expression fierce and vulnerable all at once. I love you, Lucas. I've loved you for years. I was just too scared to say it. Tears stung my eyes, and I reached for him, pulling him into a hug. I love you too, I whispered against his shoulder. Always have. He held me tightly, his breath warm against my neck. And for a moment, the world was perfect. But as we pulled apart, a distant sound broke the spell, a low, guttural growl from the trees below. Ethan stiffened, his hand grabbing mine. Did you hear that? I nodded, my pulse racing. Bear? Maybe, he said, his voice tense. We scanned the trees, but the forest was too dense to see anything clearly. The growl came again, closer this time, and my stomach twisted. We need to move, Ethan said, grabbing his pack. Now. We hurried down the trail, our steps quick and careful, the air thick with tension. The growl didn't come again, but the sense of being watched lingered, prickling the back of my neck. By the time we reached a safer spot near the lake, the sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of pink and orange. We set up camp quickly, both of us on edge. Ethan built a larger fire than usual, the flames a small barrier against the darkness. You okay? He asked, his voice low as we sat close together. Yeah, I said, though my heart was still racing. Just wasn't expecting that. He nodded, his hand resting on my knee. We're okay. We've got this. I leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence. The forest was vast and unpredictable, but with Ethan beside me, I felt like we could face anything, even the uncertainty waiting for us back home. The fire crackled, its light pushing back the darkness, but the memory of that growl lingered like a ghost. Ethan's hand stayed on my knee, grounding me, and I clung to the warmth of his touch. We were so close to the end of our trip, but the confession on the lookout had changed everything, making the return to Blackthorn feel like a looming storm. We need to talk about what happens next, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. When we leave the woods. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't pull away. I know, he said. I don't know how to do it. My dad. The guys at the shop, they'll flip. I nodded, picturing his father's stern face. The way the mechanics at Ethan's job tossed around slurs like they were nothing. They might, I admitted. But we don't have to tell them everything. Not right away. He looked at me, his eyes searching. You'd be okay with that? Keeping it quiet? For now, I said. But not forever. I'm done hiding who I am. He let out a breath, his hand squeezing my knee. I want that too. I just need time. I wanted to argue, to tell him we shouldn't have to hide it all. But I saw the fear in his eyes, the weight of a lifetime spent conforming. Okay, I said softly. We'll take it one step at a time. He smiled, small but genuine, and leaned his head against my shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a promise. We sat like that for a long time, the fire dying down, the stars bright above us. The next morning, we packed up for the final leg of our trip, the trail leading us back toward the lake. The air was crisp, the forest vibrant with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves. Ethan was quieter than usual, but he stayed close, his hand brushing mine as we walked. By noon, we reached the lake, its surface shimmering under the sun. Our car was parked a short hike away, and the sight of the familiar trailhead brought a pang of dread. The woods had been our sanctuary, a place where we could be ourselves. Blackthorn wouldn't be so forgiving. Let's swim, Ethan said suddenly, dropping his pack by the water's edge. One last time before we go back. I hesitated, the weight of reality pressing down, but his grin was infectious. Fine, I said, stripping off my shirt and following him to the water. The lake was cold, shocking my system, but Ethan's laughter warmed me. We splashed and wrestled like kids, the tension of the past days melting away. For a moment, it was just us, free and alive, the world beyond the woods forgotten. When we finally climbed out, shivering and dripping, Ethan pulled me into a hug, his arms tight around me. Thank you, he whispered, for not giving up on me. I hugged him back, my heart full. Never will. We dried off and sat by the lake, letting the sun warm our skin. Ethan was quiet, his gaze fixed on the water, and I knew he was thinking about what came next. I was too. But for now, we had this moment, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. As the sun began to set, we made our way to the car, our packs heavier with the weight of what we were leaving behind. Ethan drove, his hands steady on the wheel, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched as the forest gave way to open road. Whatever happens, I said, breaking the silence, we're in this together. He glanced at me, his eyes soft. Yeah, together. The lights of Blackthorn appeared on the horizon, small and uninviting. I reached for Ethan's hand, and he laced his fingers with mine, holding on tight. The road ahead would be hard, but we'd face it side by side. Blackthorn's main street was quiet as we drove through, the familiar diner and hardware store casting long shadows in the fading light. Ethan's hand slipped from mine as we passed the church, its steeple looming like a silent judge. I felt the weight of the town settle over us, heavy and suffocating, but I held on to the memory of the woods, of the promises we'd made. We pulled into Ethan's driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires. His dad's truck was there, and I saw Ethan's shoulders tense. You want to come in? He asked, his voice low. I shook my head. Not tonight, but I'll see you tomorrow. He nodded, his eyes meeting mine for a brief, intense moment. Tomorrow, he echoed, and then he was gone, disappearing into the house. I walked home, the night air cool against my skin. My mom was in the kitchen when I got there, asking about the trip, but I kept my answers short, my mind still in the forest. That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment Ethan's kiss, his confession, the way his hand felt in mine. It was real, and no matter what Blackthorn threw at us, I wasn't letting it go. The next day, I met Ethan at the diner, our usual spot. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept, but his smile was genuine when he saw me. Rough night? I asked, sliding into the booth across from him. Yeah, he said, stirring his coffee. Dad. asked a lot of questions about the trip. I nodded, knowing what he wasn't saying. You okay? He shrugged, but his eyes were steady. I will be. Just need to figure out how to tell him. Or if I even want to. We talked for hours. The diners hum a backdrop to our plans. We agreed to take it slow. To keep things between us for now. But to stop hiding from ourselves. It wasn't a perfect solution. But it was a start. Over the next few weeks, we found ways to carve out space for ourselves. Stolen moments in the park. Late-night drives. Quiet conversations in my garage. Blackthorn didn't change. But we did. We were stronger. Braver. Because we had each other. One evening, as we sat on the hood of Ethan's car, watching the stars from a hill outside town, he turned to me, his expression serious. I want to leave, he said. Not just Blackthorn. Oregon. Start somewhere new. My heart raced at the idea. The same dream we'd had as kids, but now within reach. Where? Anywhere, he said, his hand finding mine. As long as it's with you. I smiled, leaning into him. Then let's do it. Together. We didn't leave right away. It took months saving money, making plans, saying quiet goodbyes. But when we finally drove out of Blackthorn, our car packed with everything we owned, I felt a weight lift. The road stretched out before us, open and endless, and Ethan's hand was warm in mine. We were alone in the woods once, and it changed everything. Now, we were stepping into a new unknown. But this time, we weren't pretending. We were free, and we were together, ready to build a life where love didn't have to hide.